This is a role-playing game. And this is also a role-playing game.
Tell you what's gonna happen now. I'll ask again, polite like, and you'll answer.
Apparently this is a role-playing game too.
So your plan didn't work. On to plan B, getting kicked in the face.
And wait, this? So what the hell is a role-playing game? It almost feels like everything being released today could be an RPG. From shooters to sports games to cozy farming sims, everything under the sun has started borrowing RPG systems that are iconic to the genre and then end up being labeled as such.
Seriously? This is what we're doing?
The lines between genres are blurring, and it's not the first time an entertainment medium has gone through this.
Dave, do you mind if I ask you a personal question?
Back in the 70s, cinema hit a similar identity crisis. Directors like Scorsese, Coppola, or Kubrick blurred genres, mixing noir, western, crime, family drama into films that refused to fit into neat little boxes.
And eventually the film, it's sort of a kind of a religious film in the sense that it explodes into great violence, repression into violence. Almost like a cleansing, you know? That's gonna be a strange film.
They unlocked new, daring forms of storytelling that unlocked the art form forever.
We got into this thing with the best intentions, really. I never...
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I break your concentration?
So is that where we are? Are we standing at the edge of something transformative? Or has the term RPG just become a convenient bucket? A mishmash of ideas awkwardly stitched together to make games sound deeper and sell better.
Just think of it as I'm buying your sins. You're buying. We're paying.
Has RPG become just a collection of familiar systems, skill trees, XP bars, and loot drops? Or is the heart of role-playing something harder to define? Something not found in the mechanics, but in the player's behavior, choices, and the roles we get to inhabit? Let's explore just that by digging into where RPGs actually came from, how they evolved, and how we ended up in a world where a truck simulator and a fantasy epic might both wear the same label.
I understand. It seems complicated.
On the contrary, it's all quite simple.
Genres exist to give us a rough idea of what to expect before we start playing, but maybe they never worked as neatly as we think, especially in games where player choices and mechanics overlap so much. Perhaps genres have always been soft guidelines rather than strict rules, and maybe that's exactly why they're useful. You see, genres have always acted as a kind of contract between the creator and the audience. A sci-fi novel promises futuristic tech and societal commentary. A classic western delivers rugged heroes on lawless frontiers. But genres rarely stay fixed. They're messy. They evolve, collide, and blur, especially in games where interactivity makes boundaries even fuzzier.
You didn't see you come in. How is it you're here?
Old Witcher's trick. I concentrate real hard, and I can control time and space.
So instead of asking, what is an RPG, maybe we should ask, what isn't? Tetris clearly isn't, right? I mean, you just rotate blocks. There's no characters, there's no choices. But The Sims?
Boombraza? Huh?
You create lives, manage relationships, and build identities. Forza Horizon lets you customize avatars and explore a world. And Animal Crossing invites you to shape an entire community around your personality. Even games like FTL blur lines. They're labeled as roguelikes, but it's filled with crew management and narrative choices. Dark Souls is called an action game, yet its deep character customization and emergent storytelling feel undeniably RPG-like.
Yes, you will become one of them.
And NBA 2K's My Career mode turns sports into a role-playing game, complete with narrative choices and player growth. This genre blurring isn't unique to games. Breaking Bad mixes crime, family drama, and character progression reminiscent of an RPG. Star Wars combined sci-fi and fantasy and westerns. Westworld explicitly uses RPG metaphors, creating worlds within worlds while visitors assume roles.
How far you want to go is entirely up to you.
Maybe genres are kind of supposed to blur. Maybe the edges were never clear, and that's exactly the point. If genres have always been this fuzzy, then maybe the confusion around RPGs isn't a failure of the games themselves. Maybe it's more a reflection of our own need to neatly categorize something that was never meant to be neat in the first place. Games have always blurred lines and mixed genres, but role-playing games, perhaps more than any other type of game, have always been the genre that refuses to stay inside its box.
Oh, what's in the box?
Before every game started calling itself an RPG, the term meant something much simpler and clearer. And if we take a quick look at where RPGs actually came from, we might start to understand why the genre feels so messy today. Role-playing games, as we know them today, emerged from tabletop gaming, especially Dungeons & Dragons. D&D pioneered an entirely new experience, blending roles and improvisation with mechanical systems like dice rolls, stats, and rulebooks that added structure, tension, and meaningful consequences. When RPGs moved into the digital realm, early titles like Ultima, Wizardry, and Baldur's Gate worked hard to translate both narrative choice and mechanical depth. They emphasized things like exploration, player agency, and progression, ensuring that player decisions and their consequences always mattered. But modern RPGs often struggle with this balance. Is an RPG primarily about systems or about the player's behavior and choice? Many contemporary games heavily emphasize mechanics like skill trees and leveling systems, yet offer shallow role-playing experiences. Conversely, others lean almost entirely on narrative and player choice, with mechanics playing only a minor role. Classic titles like Fallout 1 and 2 perfectly embodied this tension. Detailed character stats shaped gameplay, but equally important were dialogue choices, faction alliances, and player decisions. Planescape Torment prioritized internalized role-playing and personal identity over mechanics, allowing players to define their characters primarily through choices rather than numbers. Ultimately, it's this tension between systems and player behavior that defines role-playing games.
And I swore to get that sword back and avenge my parents.
The healthiest RPG experiences balance both sides, creating games where mechanics matter, but the roles players inhabit matter even more. This early definition, this kind of marriage of behavior and systems, is probably the clearest, most traditional understanding of what an RPG is. But as these game systems become more popular, the mechanical side of RPGs spread to other genres. At the same time, the behavioral role-playing side became harder to quantify, harder to market, and in many cases, it got left behind. Maybe that's where the confusion started. Because if you strip away the behavior and leave only the systems, are you really still role-playing at all?
Explosion complete! Who's ready to rickety roleplay?
Fast forward to today, and the term RPG has at once become both the most specific and the most generic label in gaming. It can honestly describe anything from a text-heavy, choice-driven narrative game to a looter shooter packed with gear scores and battle passes. It's a label that's stretched so far, it often tells us more about how a game is marketed than how it actually plays. Today, the RPG genre's original balance between systems and behavior has totally fractured. On one side, you have system-first RPGs like Kenshi and Underrail and Neo Scavenger, games driven entirely by mechanics, stats, skills, and survival that naturally produce emergent storytelling. On the other side are behavior-first RPGs, such as Disco Elysium, Pentiment, or Firewatch, where player identity, dialogue choices, and emotional expression dominate, pushing mechanics quietly into the background. In between these extremes lies a messy, fascinating hybrid category. Games like Kingdom Come Deliverance, Stalker, and Metro, blending RPG mechanics with elements of sim, survival, and narrative gameplay. These hybrid games use RPG systems primarily to build immersive worlds, allowing genuine role-playing to emerge naturally from player interactions rather than strict gameplay mechanics. But there's also a fourth, more controversial type. Games that use RPG elements, like skill trees, experience, and loot, not to deepen player immersion, but primarily as retention mechanics to sustain long-term engagement.
A bit more enthusiasm, Witcher. You know, you just might enjoy yourself.
Yay, can't wait.
Titles like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Far Cry 6, or Marvel's Avengers, they showcase this trend. They borrow superficial RPG features without the depth or meaningful player choices that define true role-playing. The result is a genre definition stretched so broadly that it can feel like it encompasses everything and ultimately perhaps nothing at all. And that brings us to where we are today. RPGs have become so broad, the label can mean almost anything or nothing at all. But maybe the real issue isn't that games themselves are confused. Maybe, and bear with me here, but maybe it's that we, as players, have been asking the wrong question.
What are you saying?
Rather than debating whether a game fits neatly under the RPG label, perhaps we should be asking what kind of role-playing the game is actually offering us. Because while systems are easy to copy, the real heart of a role-playing game lies in the things that can't be duplicated. Player agency, personal choice, and the freedom to inhabit a role in a world that reacts to you.
That is kind of brilliant. For you.
Looking at RPGs today, it's easy to see the confusion. Systems once unique to RPGs have spread to nearly every genre, and games that look nothing like Baldur's Gate are now labeled as RPGs. But this might be less an identity crisis and more a natural evolution. Role-playing was always more about player behavior, inhabiting a role, making meaningful choices than fixed mechanics. Some of today's strongest RPG experiences come from unexpected places. Games like Darkest Dungeon, with its punishing stress mechanics, or Project Zomboid, where survival choices shape your identity, create powerful role-playing narratives without traditional RPG structures. Even games like Subnautica, Long Dark, or Valheim, which rely entirely on player imagination rather than quest logs and dialogue trees, can offer deeper role-playing than structured loot-driven games like Diablo 4. I mentioned this earlier, but NBA2K's My Career mode allows for detailed personal storytelling, and Euro Truck Simulator lets players craft unique narratives and identities through behavior alone. If RPGs feel messy, if they feel confusing, maybe that's because the genre is evolving into something larger than its traditional definitions. Maybe the real heart of RPG has never been in the mechanics at all, but in the player's behavior, agency, and imagination. And if that's true, then maybe it's time to stop asking whether a game is or isn't an RPG, and start asking whether the game lets you become someone, somewhere that matters to you. Because in a world where systems can be copied, but meaningful behavior can't, that might be where the future of role-playing games truly lives.
You know, it's your life and death stuff. That's what defines you, doesn't it? Really, stays with you.
Look, maybe RPGs today are messy. Maybe they're confusing, bloated, and overused as a label. But maybe that's not a sign that the genre is broken. Maybe it's a sign that it's alive. Because genres, like any creative language, only stay relevant when they evolve, fracture, and stretch into uncomfortable new places. Because maybe the most interesting role-playing games of the future won't call themselves role-playing games at all. Hey, thanks for watching. If you made it this far, type in the number of times I said RPG in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.